Every book starts with an idea, but how do you turn that spark into an outline and then actually finish writing it? That's what this module is all about. So, one of the first long form pieces of writing that I did was actually based on a song. And so the idea was I had written this song. I played in a band. I played in a rock and roll band in New York City. So this song actually had to do with this character who wakes up with these two women, and then it's all metaphors for like different parts of New York City and like the debauchery. I was, when you're young and you're playing in a rock band, and it's about like metaphor with the devil, like basically this whole story about this guy trying to figure out what happened the night before. So I always liked that idea, but I wanted to turn it into something more legit. So back then I was only writing screenplays. I was kind of getting scared to actually start writing a novel. And I thought I had some film friends. So I thought maybe if I write this screenplay, I can get it out there somehow. So that's what I started writing with. And I was really excited about it. It's about 120 pages, which is a 2-hour movie, if you look at it like that. But it was really the first time that I just took this idea and I just said, let's just go with it. Let's see what happens with this, and it turned into this sort of like Pulp Fiction meets The Hangover meets Memento type of movie. But that inspired me to go on and keep writing more screenplays. And then eventually, after a while, I stopped saying, okay, because not as many people want to read screenplays unless you're really trying to sell that movie. And so even for that movie, for instance, it was like, oh, this is too medium budget for what's going on right now. So it was a tough sell. And that's when I switched over to starting to write books, because I wanted to write the stuff that I wanted to write it the way it was supposed to be. So that's what books really allow you to do compared to screenplays, where you can do that, but it means there's a budget involved. So you have to think about that when you're writing. Look, and the whole point too is just to know that you don't have to be perfect. It definitely came from a couple of outlines, a couple of ideas, this story, all my stories really. And then it slowly gets more polished and more polished until it becomes the final piece. But don't worry about that at the beginning. I know everybody wants to write this perfect piece the first time. It just doesn't happen. You might find some real gems in that first writing, but there's also going to be a lot of like stuff that needs to be polished. Hopefully by the end of this module, you'll have a roadmap of how to turn that idea into the outline, into the finished story. So let's get started with lesson 1, finding your big idea. Great books don't come out of thin air. They come from the stories or the questions or the passions that won't leave you alone. So when I'm usually starting a story, I'm like, what am I obsessed with? What idea do I think I have the momentum and the love for, whether it's just a character, whether it's the theme, whether, something that I know can be a longer story. Because there's a lot of people who say, like, I have this big book idea. And after listening to it, you sometimes say to them, unfortunately, this only sounds like chapter 1. In that case, usually I'll encourage them to write like 10 more ideas that follow behind this idea, or come up with something new that maybe is something that can last a long time. Like writing a book, for instance, like this screenplay that I mentioned before, the Spanish Harlem one, it took place in one day, the whole thing. So it's like it would be a 2-hour movie all in one day and one night. So you have to think about those ideas. You're going to have to write a lot, and you're going to have to follow every part of that day. So it needs to be interesting, especially in this genre that I was writing this book in, or this screenplay. So yeah, when you find that, which one gives you the most inspiration? Yeah, so the videos in this series, they will all have 3 lessons in each of them. And so let's move on to lesson 2, which I call brainstorming hacks. Because sometimes your best ideas when you're just being playful with it, and that's when you're really enjoying the writing instead of forcing yourself to come up with something. Just go with it, and if it doesn't work, that's fine. You can start all over again and find the way it's supposed to work. You can use mind maps. You can ask what if questions. Sometimes I walk down the street and I just voice record an idea, or I videotape something that's going to inspire me for this idea for later. Or I just think of like, even like how method actors think, like, I'm in this situation right now, but if I put myself more in that area that inspires me, like if I'm talking about the streets of New York, let's walk through the streets of New York. Let's walk down an alleyway or something, go someplace a little scary, a little dangerous, that gives you the inspiration to write your story, depending on what it is. Yeah. And like me, I always have a notebook. I always have my backpack. I always have a notebook. And so everywhere I walk, I am writing down ideas here and there. Sometimes I have a smaller little notebook that you can just kind of jot down, keep in your pocket. So, any way you can store those ideas for later when you actually do maybe have more time to sit down and write is always a good idea. Look, we live in a modern era where we have telephones, we record stuff, and we have all different ways. So, not that much of an excuse to not be able to like put these ideas down for us. So, lesson three, test your idea. So, and like I was saying before, some ideas aren't really worthy. I mean, they're going to take a lot of imagination. If you hear an idea and you're like, how do you turn that into a book? You have to ask yourself, and that seems hard to someone with a huge imagination. So imagine how it's going to be to, the readers or the viewers or whatever, format you're writing in, which is fine because, sometimes just write it anyway. Maybe it's an essay, maybe it's a like novella, maybe not every idea has to be a book, but it'll help you with your writing technique to write short stories and stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with it not being a full novel. That could come later. You could write a whole book full of short stories and essays. So there's lots of options and they're all helpful to your writing skills. Anything that improves your writing skills is always worthwhile. I mean, we are writers and that's how we get our craft done. So if you're stuck trying to figure out the idea for your book, for a novel or something like that, don't worry about that too much. Write the idea that's coming to you right now, the one that you're passionate about, even if it's like, okay, it's not long enough to be, can't go that far. That's fine. Write this story. I guarantee you're going to learn something. I guarantee you're going to get better. So check out the next video. I'm going to go off into more stuff about, going from this idea to the outline to the finished book, or like I said, finished essay, short story, or memoir, something else. Stick around.